This is Joey Ryan, and you're watching Wrestling with Regret. See, I got through it one take. I had to tongue tie a little bit on the Wrestling with Regret, but I got through it with one take.
For a long time, the wrestling industry has struggled with how to portray people on the LGBT spectrum, and very rarely has it been done in a tasteful or accurate manner. Every once in a while, homosexuality has been at the core of a wrestling gimmick with varying degrees of success, but for the most part, gimmicks of a certain persuasion have been slapped with an androgynous or eccentric label to allow these characters to display things of a homosexual nature without having to directly call it out as such. These actions are usually meant to psych out opponents and make the fans either boo or, more often, titter with laughter. The history of such characters goes back decades, with guys like Gorgeous George in the 1940s and the Adrians Street and Adonis in the 1980s. And we can't forget the Exoticos of Mexico, perhaps the most famous of all being Cassandro. There have been tons of gimmicks that have fallen into the gay or androgynous category just this past generation alone, and this week, for better or for worse, I'm going to rank them the top 8 most outrageous LGBT gimmicks of the last 25 years. Number 8. Rico. In 2002, Rico debuted in WWE as the evil stylist for another entry you'll see in this countdown. He was always ambiguously effeminate during that run, but was reborn in 2003 with an Exotico-type gimmick, wearing makeup, prancing around the ring, and engaging in some, well, let's just call it horseplay. This run was best known for his odd couple partnership with Charlie Haas that resulted in a brief tag title run on SmackDown. The biggest reason I'm not ranking him any higher on the list is because we've already seen this gimmick done before. I mean, come on, the makeup, the dancing around, right on down to the Valley at ringside to create confusion about his sexuality. Sound familiar?
So imagine what I could do to you.
As entertaining as Rico's character was, it was hard to ignore that it was a watered-down version of one of the pioneers of androgyny in wrestling, exotic Adrian Street. But there's a reason the gimmick was so similar. That's because Rico actually went to Street himself to get his blessing to use the gimmick, and even spent time with him to learn the psychology of the character. Because if you're going to do the gimmick, you might as well learn from the guy who revolutionized it. Number 7. Angel. For a while now, fans of the show have been asking me to review XPW, seen by many as the West Coast equivalent of ECW, and while a long form on the Fed might be happening in the future, let me tell you now about one of its most memorable stars. Debuting in the late 90s, Angel was essentially an American Exotico, where he dressed and acted effeminately, but was still a capable wrestler. The character itself wasn't that outrageous on paper, but what puts him on this list is the stuff he did in the ring. He earned the nickname the Hardcore Homo due to some of the insane stuff he put himself through in XPW's most violent matches, taking risks that most people wouldn't dare try. Angel didn't look imposing, but he could work a crowd exceptionally well, bringing people in with his antics and earning their respect by putting his body on the line. Number 6. Mickie James. Some consider Mickie James to be one of the most memorable female wrestlers of her generation, and it's hard to argue that her debut storyline in WWE isn't a contributing factor. James made her debut in 2005 as a passionate fan of women's champion Trish Stratus. Over time, Trish was uncomfortable with the amount of attention she was getting from James, finally boiling over when Mickie professed her love for her idol. When Trish rebuked Mickie's advances, James attacked her and was officially branded a psycho.
You broke my heart, but now I'm gonna break you!
Considering how soon this came after a victorious heel run, it seemed that the people in charge of writing for Raw at the time really loved their psycho, quasi-lesbian characters. Though Mickie would even out emotionally over time, I think her nearly year-long angle with Trish was pretty well done. A take on the stereotypical stalker trope with some erotic overtones thrown in, it was one of the most captivating angles of the mid-2000s. Number 5. Billy and Chuck. Who would have guessed that Chuck Palumbo would have been part of one of the hottest acts in WWE after the invasion angle fizzled out? Palumbo teamed with Billy Gunn in late 2001 after getting kicked out of the Alliance. By 2002, the team had turned heel and their characters began to evolve. The pair began to show more affection toward each other, almost as if they were in a homosexual relationship.
That's real masculine!
This helped the duo get over more than ever before, winning the tag titles twice that year. In the fall, Chuck popped the question to Billy, and soon, SmackDown would have their first ever same-sex wedding. Commitment ceremony. Things were going well enough during the proceedings, but when it was finally time to pull the trigger, the two got cold feet and said it was all an act.
We're not gay. I mean, we got nothing against gay people.
I love when the crowd starts to boo when Billy says they're not gay, then he wins them back when he says they don't dislike gay people. Yay, tolerance! In one of the most legit awesome moments in wrestling, the old minister tore off his prosthetic makeup to reveal he was actually Raw GM Eric Bischoff, then 3-minute warning ran in and destroyed the place, and everyone eventually moved on. Oh wait, that is after the company got their ass publicly chewed out by GLAAD. GLAAD, or the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, had actually worked alongside the company as a consultant for the storyline and helped secure mainstream coverage for the gay wedding, so you can imagine how upset they were when the angle was burned to the ground in front of the world. A few days later on Confidential, a short-lived non-kayfabe news magazine series, Vince McMahon stood up to the haters who trashed the company for the ceremony gone awry.
I don't know why, a commitment ceremony in our venue would be any different because they're not gay.
Vince, people weren't pissed about the ceremony because Billy and Chuck weren't actually gay. People were pissed because you did a bait and switch and you worked GLAAD. Anyway, the team didn't last long after the wedding angle, as Billy got injured in a tag title tournament match the following month. But once the ruse over their sexuality was revealed, it's hard to imagine the team having much of a shelf life anyway. Number 4. Razor Ramon Hadge. Japan, man. Japan. While Billy and Chuck were grabbing everyone's attention in the US, wrestler and comedian Masaki Sumitani was making similar headlines in Japan as Razor Ramon HG, or Hard Gay for short. What started out as a character on Japanese TV eventually became one of the top stars of the Hustle promotion. Dressed in stereotypical fetish biker gear, doing a lot of air humping, HG was an underdog character with a never-say-die attitude. Ooh, quick thought, put Sami Zayn in some leather shorts and aviator shades and he'll be more over than ever before! HG had to leave wrestling in 2009 when he broke his foot in the ring, and the character has since been retired altogether. Due to the use of blatant gay stereotyping, Sumitani's character has been frowned upon by some Japanese advocacy groups, but many fans of comedy wrestling the world over still talk about the gimmick to this day. Number 3. Orlando Jordan. It's often been said that some of the best gimmicks in wrestling are just that wrestler's actual personality just cranked up to 11, but this entry might be one of the only exceptions to that rule. Shortly before he was released by WWE in 2006, Orlando Jordan, who was bisexual in real life, proposed to the company that he switch to a gimmick that would better reflect his lifestyle. He would even come down to the ring with 2 valets, his girlfriend and his boyfriend. For whatever reason, the company shot the idea down, but in March of 2010, OJ finally got to unveil his grand vision inside the Impact Zone, and well, the look on Taz and Tanae's faces really tells the story.
He's a little
eccentric,
a little outlandish,
bizarre.
Bizarre is probably the best word to describe Orlando.
There he was, wearing only the finest officially licensed TNA caution tape, posing with his 2 loves. He was soon put into a feud with global champion Rob Terry that involved lots of mind games, not unlike the classic Goldust Razor Ramon feud from 1996.
Talk about freaks. That's Orlando Jordan.
As time went on, the bisexual element of the character faded away, and Jordan fell into a more stereotypical gay gimmick before being released in the summer of 2011. The gimmick was outlandish enough that it could have caught steam, and it felt right at home in TNA, which was all about reality-based storylines at the time, but Jordan just didn't have the natural charisma to make it work. Number 2. HLA, Hot Lesbian Action. In September of 2002, on the same week Billy and Chuck were to be wed on SmackDown, the boys over on Monday Night Raw had a counterattack. What if, they said, instead of having 2 guys pretending to be gay getting married, we had 2 girls pretending to be gay just making out? Auga!
Please,
You ready, JR?
welcome the lesbian!
On this fateful Monday night, one that happened to coincide with the season opener for Monday Night Football, by the way, a pair of unsigned female wrestlers went to the ring, took off each other's clothes, did some awkward light petting while Eric Bischoff watched, then they both got destroyed by 3-minute warning. The end. No storylines were advanced, nobody got over, no semblance of competition, just 10 minutes of the softest of softcore porn. Our ratings ploy so blatant the only thing that could have made it worse was if Bruno the cameraman tried to barge into their dressing room. And by the way, how were the ratings for that week's Raw? Almost more insulting than the fact they did this stupid stunt at all was that the women involved were clearly not into it. I've seen more content on Skinamax. Think of all the same-sex kisses on WWE television that were done better than this. Christy Hemme and Lillian Garcia, Sable and Tori Wilson and Dawn Marie, Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle. Little known fact, the women in the skit were actually workers from UPW, the same place where John Cena originally trained, which is ironic because while you can't see Cena, I wish I could unsee this embarrassing segment. Well, folks, you've seen a lot of outrageous gimmicks and angles on this countdown so far, so now it's time to find out who
Hold on a minute, Brian. Can we talk for a second?
Oh, hey everybody, it's James Mansfield, a fellow YouTuber and a recent contestant on RuPaul's Drag Race. What's up, James?
Now, nobody knows more about outrageous characters than yours truly, but can we take a moment to talk about a wrestler that's a little more subtle?
A subtle gay gimmick in wrestling? Now, that I'd like to see. Wait, Joey Ryan doesn't have a gay gimmick. I mean, the penis suplex is one thing, but I mean...
That's not Joey Ryan. That's Chase Walker.
Who?
Chase Walker was one of the characters from the Wrestling Retribution Project, a TV show that was funded with Kickstarter money and taped in Los Angeles back in 2011. Though it was never picked up, tons of big indie names like Ryan, Kenny Omega, Brian Cage, Timothy Thatcher, Adam Pearce, and Colt Cabana took part, performing under totally different names and characters.
But most of those guys are California workers. Wouldn't the fans have a hard time telling the difference?
That's not the point.
Ryan played a character named Chase Walker who was gay but didn't exhibit any of the stereotypes you've seen on TV before. It wasn't until a pair of heels outed him publicly that Walker finally came out to the audience in a heartfelt speech.
Professional wrestling has always looked at homosexuality in a negative light. It's time for professional wrestling to join the rest of the world in acceptance and intolerance. And I'm here to tell you that Chase Walker, that I am gay.
Wow. So the heels outing Chase kind of sounds like when Kaz and Christopher Daniels alleged that Dixie Carter and AJ Styles were having a secret affair.
Did you really just compare Chase Walker to the Claire Lynch storyline?
No, I didn't. What are we talking about?
The thing is, Chase's sexuality was never a part of his gimmick. Before he came out, he was just like any other wrestler. And when he finally did reveal he was gay, the crowd was totally behind him, having already earned their respect by being a great, engaging competitor. He didn't wear makeup or spank his opponents, he just wrestled and happened to be gay. And that was that. In my opinion, it's probably one of the best depictions of a gay wrestler that's ever been done.
Well, you're probably right, James, but remember, this isn't necessarily about the best and worst LGBT gimmicks in this countdown. It's all about the most outrageous.
So, Goldust?
Goldust! And the number one most outrageous LGBT gimmick in the last 25 years is Goldust. Sure, it's an obvious choice, but you can't say it's not deserving. Dustin Runnels, the man behind the makeup, debuted as the Bizarre One in late 1995, wearing a wig and face paint and speaking in low, lustful tones in his promos that quoted Hollywood classics. Goldust's androgyny turned heads and threw opponents off their game immediately. But it wasn't until well into his first Intercontinental title run that he began to incorporate more overt homosexual tropes into his character, including groping his opponents and hitting on them.
Got big hands. Do you know what rigor mortis is?
Much like his predecessors Gorgeous George and Adrian Street, Goldust never admitted to being gay and was also accompanied by a female valet, Marlena, in order to further throw off the scent. But he was able to elevate the androgynous archetype by being dark and sinister. His behavior would get even more ridiculous by the late 90s with his stint as the artist formerly known as Goldust before taking a break with an evangelical gimmick, then going right back into it months later. The Goldust of 2017 is a far cry from that of 1997. These days, the original incarnation would never leave the writer's desk, much less make it onto television. But for all the moments the character's given us, for being an early harbinger of the Attitude Era years before it began, and for taking an outwardly questionable gimmick and running with it, that's why I say Goldust is my favorite and definitely the most outrageous LGBT gimmick in the last 25 years. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, comment below, subscribe to Wrestling With Wregret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.
I could be a tulip, I could be a man. The only way of knowing is to catch me if you can. You can suppose what you wanna suppose, but I'm a sweet transvestite with a broken nose.